To unpack General Fani Masemola's testimony at the Madlanga Commission further now, let's welcome Chad Thomas, who's a crime expert. Chad, a very good afternoon to you. Just having listened, of course, to the Commission since 9 o'clock this morning and the wrap that was given there by my colleague Kenny Mapanga, to what extent do you think, General Masemola's testimony today was pivotal to that of Lieutenant General Mkhwanazi's claims of a systemic pattern of political and criminal collusion, especially when you consider that the general statements today are around concerns about just how abruptly the PKTT was disbanded by the police minister?
Good afternoon to you and good afternoon to the viewers. A lot of what was spoken about today by General Masemola is corroborative of what we heard from General Mkhwanazi last week. We hear that there was interference. We hear that there was a request to disband a unit. And of course, the question now is whether or not that unit was disbanded, whether or not it was a lawful or unlawful instruction. And of course, it's going to be the Commission's determination what the precise role of the minister is to that of the commissioner, whether it is director and policy driven and whether or not the commissioner is only operationally driven. So it's been a very interesting dynamic. We've seen a lot coming out today in support of what the General Mkhwanazi had to say last week. But there's still a lot that we have to get through in respect of this Commission of Inquiry, especially when it comes to the in-camera witnesses and the whistleblowers, because what we're hearing from now are two very senior decision makers. And of course, we're hearing their version of events. We're now going to have to test this against other information that's going to be forthcoming.
And I want to talk about just the difficulty that Masemola had in responding to what he would have done if he was instructed on that unlawful instruction to disband the PKTT. I mean, he reveals that the Minister Mchunu, did not seek his advice on the disbandment of the task team for reasons that are unknown. But he told, President Cyril Ramaphosa, who said he would then speak to the minister. How do you interpret the lack of follow-through, firstly from the president after, being briefed, but also just the response around that matter from Masemola?
I think today created more emphasis on a timeline. We heard that the president has also been engaged on this. The president was also approached on this, and the president also had knowledge of this in February of this year. And we know the first parliamentary submissions made by Mkhwanazi in March. So it now shows us that everything that led to the July 6th press conference did in fact follow some or other protocol and engagement. And we do know what it's like trying to deal with bureaucratic red tape. It takes time for people to get back. But they waited 7 months after the instruction to actually go public with all of this. And I can tell you this, and I may be somewhat subjective, but during those 7 months that they were waiting, I had cause to meet with members of the political killings task team that were operational in Johannesburg. They worked on the Armand Swart case. They worked on cases involving Katie Molefe and Vusikat Matlana. And they were operating without any fear or favor that this unit had purportedly been disbanded. They were operating as a unit, despite the fact that they were functioning with bodyguards from the Special Task Force, just to show how dangerous it had been. And we heard how some of the members had actually stopped working in the unit because of threats on their lives. So it's a very interesting dynamic that's playing out. We're now hearing that there was a timeline from the date in which that letter was received, that infamous letter disbanding the unit on the 31st of December 2024, all the way up to 6th of July, where there were active attempts to engage with the apex leadership of not just law enforcement or the justice cluster, but of our actual country, the president's office itself.
And I was going to ask you about, the two essentially key figures that have been mentioned several times, including, of course, by Lieutenant General Mkhwanazi, that is Matlala and Molefe. And also how, the National Commissioner, Masemola, mentioned their relationship with Sibiya in a way. So again, the question does need to be asked. I mean, does Masemola's testimony so far strengthen the evidence of the systemic corruption and interference, or does it still fall short of hard proof, notwithstanding, of course, that we know that some evidence will be made in camera?
We haven't seen what I would state to be empirical evidence to the extent that it cannot be in any way disputed. all evidence has to be interrogated, and one has to respect the principle of audi alteram partem to hear the other side. And we will get to hopefully hear from the other side. But I think it's very important to note two things at this point in time. The first is that General Konazi and General Masemola are career police officers. Both have been in the most senior leadership position of the police. They're not going to put their decades of experience and reputation on the line by making vexatious and frivolous claims. They were obviously very concerned about the disbanding of this unit. Let's talk about this unit. This is the second point I want to make. I've sat in court with this unit during the bail applications for Vusikat Batlala as well as the bail applications for Katie Molefe. They had to come there under extremely intense protection because they had put themselves at risk. For me to see generals standing up for a unit and members that have successfully infiltrated, most probably disrupted and are in the process of dismantling what could have been or may have actually been the one crime syndicate that infiltrated South Africa at the very highest echelons of our law enforcement. Well, kudos to that unit and kudos to these members in thwarting the attempts to disband it, because this unit has had success. We've seen those successes in court virtually on a weekly basis.
Chad, thank you so much for your analysis. Really good speaking to you. Chad Thomas is a crime expert, of course, just responding following day 4 of the Madlanga Commission, earlier hearing from National Police Commissioner General Fanny Masemola.